Jane's currently the Director of Product Design at Babylon Health, whose mission it is to put accessible and affordable health service in the hands of every person on earth. No small task. Please welcome Jane to the stage for her talk, 10 Easy Ways to Irritate Your Design Team. Big round of applause, please.
Thank you. Well, good morning, Northern UX, or as we in Scotland like to call it, Southern UX. Ooh. So I'm going to tell, it's quite a light-hearted talk with a hard meaning, which is 10 ways to irritate your design team. And this has been written based off my experience and a small survey I did with some friends and people I know on Twitter. So it's slightly biased towards in-house design teams, but I think it's also applicable to agencies, and it's also applicable to tech teams as well. And yeah, you stole my thunder. This is where I'm working now, Babylon Health. And this is what you see when you come up the stairs. And I took a picture of this the first day I arrived at Babylon. I was like, bloody hell, how are we going to do that? But it's an amazing place to work. And in fact, part of the reason I'm here is we're hiring. So come and talk to me at lunch if you want to help me do this. So what I want to talk about is the problems that design teams face and how difficult it is to fix them. And part of the reason it's difficult to fix them is that you can't fix this alone. It's everybody in the business causes these problems. So one of the first things you have to do is try and get the business to care. So I want you to imagine this kind of like a CFO, the big chief finance officer, and he's saying, well, why should I care about designers with their feelings and their beards and their bring their dogs to work and their artisan coffee? Why should I care about these people? So here's one reason. I love this quote. Design is not style. It's not about giving shape to the shell and not giving a damn about the guts. Good design is a Renaissance attitude that combines technology, cognitive science, human need, and beauty to produce something that the world didn't know it was missing. Well, can you imagine that? Can you imagine the competitive advantage if you're producing something the world didn't know it was missing? Can you imagine all the startups trying to do this? And this is why design is so impactful on a business. So one company that realized this is IBM. You know, the kind of old fuddy-duddy, used to be known as Big Blue, IBM, a very feature-driven organization. Well, they spent over $100 million to hire hundreds of designers to transform its business into a design business. So they became user-first instead of feature-first, and this has transformed their business. And the ratio of designers in the business has gone from 1 to 72, so that's 1 designer to 72 people who are not designers in the business. And now the ratio is 1 to 8, which is pretty incredible. And they're not alone. This is from a recent report by Envision, and they show the shift in businesses to become more design-focused. So Atlassian, for example, was 1 designer to every 25 people other in the organization, and now it's 1 to 9, and so on. You see this, the average ratio seems to be about 1 to 8, 1 to 9. And it's not just these guys, not these publicly available figures. Facebook is quadrupling its designer hiring targets. I'm sure we all know how many designers government are hiring. The big 4 accountancies such as EY and Accenture are buying entire design companies to get access to designers and researchers. Capital One's been on a hiring spree. Challenger banks such as Monzo and Starling, they consider design as a recipe for success. And this is leading to a massive skill shortage. So that's another thing you can tell your CFO. And another thing that's contributing to the skill shortage, I think, is design education. We have a strange thing in Britain that design is traditionally taught in art schools, with the exception of some of these great product design courses like Loughborough. And so people have to go and learn on the job, because very few people emerge as a fully fledged commercial designer. So if your organization isn't willing or able to invest in junior designers, you're going to be battling all these companies I mentioned to hire people with the ability to impact your business. And then on top of this, the tenure of a mid to senior designer now is 2 years. Can you believe that? So it makes good commercial sense to retain and attract top talent. And it's not just about design as well. As some of you may use Lever. It's a tool that you use when you're hiring. So you get the CVs in and you sort of track candidates. And this guy is one of the designers at Lever. And he talks about why is faulty reasoning. Tech work is increasingly in demand, and employees are gaining more leverage, while employers are finding it more costly and expensive to hire. I work at Lever, so I should know. Another message to your CFO. So I'm going to give you some context about how I describe the design process, because that will also give context for the rest of the talk. Now, brace yourself. It's a double diamond. I bloody love the double diamond. I'm sorry, I'm not apologising. I love the double diamond. It has done me proud over the years. I've joined 4 different companies where design has been like sort of an afterthought and put in the cupboard. I've literally been in a cupboard in some situations, and I've had to come and try to explain to the rest of the organisation why they should be doing this big transformation. I just wander around the building with this sort of double diamond, showing it to people, and I say, yes, we have to know we're building the right thing. And then once we know that, we have to work out how the design looks like, and that's build the thing right. And right now, you're talking at the wrong kind of point, and it's great. And then you know when there's an executive says to me, Jane, why are we talking about this? Because surely we're in build the right thing stage. And I'm like, yes, do a victory dance. So that's why I love the double diamond. So I want to talk about my design process. So for build the right thing, we do lots of generative research. For build the thing right, we do summative research. And this is my personal spin on the double diamond. It's a 2.5 diamond, because I also like to talk about shaping the problem space, and we do that via ethnographic research to understand and uncover unmet needs. And then we ship. And ideally, you ship multiple versions of something. If you're not quite sure how it's going to land, you use all of these techniques to form hypotheses, and then you do some A/B testing or multivariate testing to try and understand what your design, how it impacts behavior. And then what you should be doing, you know, if you've got like a mature product, rather than just like launching something every 6 months, instead you should be trying to ship very, very regularly. And to do that, you have to break your design into something called shippable increments. So tiny, tiny little chunks. And each chunk should be allowing you to learn something, or it should be putting some value into the customer's hand. So this is what I consider to be a good design process. Now, unfortunately, because I've only just started at Babylon, all of the examples I'm going to give you here are from my previous company, which is the very lovely Moo. You may know Moo. Oh, excuse me. Let me have a drink. Talking is thirsty work, isn't it? Yeah. So Moo, you may know Moo from our business cards. But I should say their business cards, actually, now. You may know Moo from their business cards. But actually, Moo is an enterprise software company as well, because they have this tool which allows big organizations like Uber and Facebook and a large sportswear company, which I shall not mention, to manage their sort of marketing collateral. And that's called Moo Business Services. So we were talking to the account managers at Moo Business Services, which their account managers make fantastic customer proxies, by the way. And they were telling us that there was this massive demand for an approval service, and that if they had it, they would be able to sell more to bigger customers, to better customers, and it was an absolute priority. So just to explain what an approval flow is, generally sort of marketing collateral and print, somebody would order the print, somebody else would approve that order, somebody else may pay for it, somebody else may then check that the correct thing has been shipped. And it's quite a complex process. So we said, okay, we flew over to Boston, and we did a workshop. Thank you, Alison. We did lots of sketching workshops. We tried to understand what the account managers thought that the problem was based on their understanding. We did some really beautiful sketches. We did some fast, rapid prototyping using Post-it notes. We started moving it into our pattern library, and we ended up with what seemed to be a pretty well thought through solution. And at this point, theoretically, we could have just shipped. But I love this quote. I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. So at this point, we had to take a step back and say, actually, are we right? Do we really know that this is the right answer? Do we really know that this is going to solve the problem for everyone? So we reviewed our assumptions. We thought, what's the riskiest assumption about this? And the riskiest assumption was that this would work for everyone. So we paused, and everything I talk about here, so we paused, and we went back into sketches. And the reason we did sketches, we used these as a provocation to talk to people and a prompt for conversation. And I have found that people are much more willing to critique something that's much more rough in a draft form, like a sketch, rather than a beautifully finished design. So we took this out to all sorts of different organizations, not just the ones that the account managers had told us about. And we found, this is not surprising, but it was actually a little surprising, different companies are different. And not only are different companies different, but different departments within companies are different. So we tested our assumption of the real customers, and we discovered that what we had designed wasn't going to work. But we discovered actually the MVP, the way that we could quickly get some value into our customers' hands and learn, was actually just an email. And at this point, this is the build the right thing. And then we moved into build the thing right. So we have, this is what the current email looked like. And this is what we were proposing. And how do you get there? It's so complex, you know. Is the email an alert? Is it as well as a way to approve? Is it an active approval or a passive approval? Where should the button be? What should the copy say? And we decided we needed further research to execute in this sort of detail. So we did classic sort of usability testing. And I always say that research should be a team sport. So at this point, when we were build the thing right, we got all the developers, account managers, everybody watched the research together. And we did this collaborative wash-up. So everybody in the room that was observing the research wrote down their observations in Post-it notes. We clustered them, and then we worked out different things that we had to fix. And we then, thanks to Christina, we did another one of these sort of 4 ways. And we assessed our findings like this. So if something gave a lot of user value and it was easy and important, that was something that we could build first. But down here, if it was really difficult and it had low business value, then, well, actually, why should we build this? And I called this my, hippo defense. I don't know if you know what a hippo is. It's the highest paid person in the organization. So if you have somebody in saying we have to build this, try and map it like this, and you find that if the idea's down there, it's very difficult for them to fight for it. So this is it in action. And this is how we sort of mapped out the findings for this, the email that was going to be used for the approval flow. So this gives a bit of design context. And I'm going to give you now irritation number 1, asking your design team to color in. So you think about it, you've got this group of people and their skills allow them to uncover unmet needs, to innovate, to ensure product market fit, to stop you building the wrong thing, which is another thing you can tell their CFO. If you've got a great design team, they save you money. Because imagine we'd built that approval flow and it didn't work. How much would that have cost the business? So we saved them huge amounts of money as well as making them money. And think about the design team. They can build things that are a joy to use, that people evangelize about them, so you have, which is a way that products grow rather than simply marketing. But in many companies, in my experience, they are seen as just people who execute on other people's ideas. And I call this coloring in. And this is often the results. So basically, instead of doing all of this thinking, they just do this little bit. And this is often the result of a disempowered or centralized design team that supports multiple tech teams. So, you know, the literal one that I once found, 4 guys in a cupboard getting Jira tickets flung at them. And this has many bad effects. So the team lacks context, so they don't make great decisions. Morale is low. Your business doesn't get to look at other solutions and optimize. You build the wrong thing and waste money, and you don't achieve product market fit. And another issue with these kind of centralized design teams getting Jira flung at them is that although they're both using Jira, the tech teams will be working on Agile, and the centralized team will often be working on some kind of ticketing-based Kanban waterfall system. So then the design team become blockers, and then they feel really miserable. That's often when they leave. And then even if they're embedding a team, if they aren't part of a collaborative process, this creates this kind of culture of handoffs. The rest of the tech team are not directly involved in research or problem exploration or experimentation and validation. The design team just becomes order takers, and they do what they're told by the business. And then once the work is shipped, the team has very little contact with support or the customer success or sales. They just move on to the next thing, and they don't understand the impact. So another way to look at it is like this. You've got the design team in a cupboard, throwing work to the dev team, chucking things over the fence. And that's a very big irritation. And it's not good agile design. In fact, this is how you stop this first irritation, is to try and have a unified crew, because good agile design happens when we have a truly cross-functional crew with research happening in the crew. And I think we all know that good development means fairly autonomous, test-driven, continuous delivery. But what does continuous delivery look like? Continuous design for continuous delivery look like? And what is the role of the designer in a fairly autonomous agile team? So I believe that in order to ship great products, you need to move from this genius designer working alone, saving the world, to a lone designer in a crew clinging on by their fingernails, feeding the development beast. That's not good either. What you need to do is a designer who facilitates the entire team to make great decisions in order to support great design. So the way that we did this at Moo, and I also did this at GDS, was something called the quad. So in the quad, the product team is all about shaping the future of the product. Which I call that build the right thing. You have design, and we look to the future to build the right thing, and we also care about crafting brilliant experiences and executing. You have tech, and in this format, they were all largely about executing. And then we had this wonderful thing, and I don't know if you've ever worked with this, it was an Agile delivery coach, which was kind of like a superbly kind and wonderful facilitator and delivery manager. And they supported all of us to delight customers, to build, run, own, and iterate great products, and to have a happy team. So there's some principles for how we see the quad working. So each of these disciplines has certain kind of pull factors or gravitational fields that attract certain types of work and responsibilities. And the idea is that responsibilities are aligned and agreed based on context and the people playing these roles. And then as trust develops, you should be able to alternate attendance at certain sessions, and that you find sometimes that one or two people from the quad is enough to make sure that the team's perspective is covered. So in other words, it's consent, not consensus, and that's how you can move at speed. And another diagram, this one's thanks to Jeff Patton. So here, you work in these kind of iterative passes. You have potentially shippable software. You test, you learn, you iterate, and there's no magical bullet for this because executing it is really difficult. So what happens because executing this is really difficult? Often teams get some of this right, just some of it, but not all of it, and they become something. John Cutler in Hacker Noon coined this term. They became a feature factory. And I like to call this Agile Theater. So they're shipping just lots of stuff. They've got burn down charts, but that's kind of the extent of their Agile. Another way to describe this is cargo cult. Cargo cult Agile, because people think because they have stand-ups that somehow they're being Agile, but actually that's not true. And I don't know if you know, have you heard of cargo cults? This is a massively, massively simplistic explanation. But during the Second World War, America established these kind of forward bases in some of the Pacific Islands. So from the point of view of the Pacific Islanders, basically these guys just turned up with planes and this fantastic thing called Coca-Cola. And then mysteriously the guys left. And the Pacific Islanders really, really wanted to have some of that sweet, sweet Coca-Cola. So they thought, well, the guys came with planes. Well, maybe if we build a plane, the Coca-Cola will come back. And this became a cargo cult. So these poor Pacific Islanders were basically assembled planes from sticks and goggles from sticks in the hope that this somehow would magically mean the return of Coca-Cola and all these other fantastic things. So there's another example of a plane that had been built out of bamboo. So this is when you have Agile, that simply is just people having some stand-ups and some stuff stuck on the wall and nothing else. That's what I call cargo cult Agile. And these are some of the ways you can recognize cargo cult Agile. So no objectives. Another way you can summarize this, it's just projects, not products. It means that the team and the work has no connection to the customer or business outcome. They just work on stuff. No metrics, as I said, so they don't understand what impact what they're delivering has. Or sometimes maybe the product manager has a little bit of data, but that isn't shared with the team. Success theater. So you know you're in a kind of Agile cargo cult when people talk about how fast delivery is, and that's all they talk about. You can tell a lot from an organization from what it celebrates. So if the organization is celebrating shipping lots of stuff, that is an Agile cargo cult. You don't acknowledge failure or learn from it, so you don't ship, test, and learn. You just stick things out there and forget about it. Roadmaps are all about prioritization instead of learning, and you chase upfront revenue. So this is my irritation number 2, and this leads to irritation number 3. The team just ships and forgets. The result of everything I talked about in this kind of Agile theater, this Agile cargo cult, is that the team just sticks something out there. They just stick stuff out, and then they forget about it. And it means that the team doesn't understand the impact of new features on usability. And if they do understand, they can't get the work prioritized to do anything about it. And then the design team, this frustration of never being able to fix things, to make things better, to learn and evolve is incredibly frustrating, massive irritation. So then what you find is that the design team starts to do a lot of upfront design in a silo so that they can somehow still iterate and do user research. And I've seen teams work for 6 months like this. And then, despite being in the same crew, they just kind of throw these prototypes over the wall to developers. And because it's not been unpacked into shippable increments, the developers are like, well, what do we build first? And then things start to slow down. And then you get stakeholders starting to shoehorn stuff into these big releases because they think it's their only chance to get stuff shipped. So you slow down further and things get blocked while everyone argues about their pet feature. And then, of course, working like this, you start to get tech debt and design debt. So this is what you should be doing. You should be doing these shippable increments, the test, measure, learn cycle. I think we all know this. It's very, very important to be shipping, testing, understanding the outcome that you want to have, and then seeing what your work, what impact it's had, and then maybe it's not had the impact you want, you try something else, or it's got the impact you want, and then you can gradually evolve. Because if you don't do this, and you work the way I've described, this means all these factors over time, a team will gradually grind to a halt, and you get irritation number 4, which is nothing customer-facing gets shipped. And I've actually worked in an organization where this has happened, and some friends of mine told me about this as well when I was doing research for this. The team eventually runs into so much tech debt they become paralyzed, or you're in endless meetings where no one can agree what to do next, or something that's considered a quick project in order to get revenue to sort out the tech debt gets shoehorned in, but because of the tech and design debt, it's not a quick fix. Something that should take 3 months takes 6 months, and then the team gets paralyzed even further, and then people start leaving in droves. And once you get to this point, you need to get somebody visionary to come in and start fixing irritations 1 to 3, because otherwise, you're going to have no team left. And that person comes in, needs to start hiring to replace the team that's left, which leads me to my next irritation, hiring. Hiring's often a really terrible experience on both sides. To hire well, you need clarity. First of all, you need clarity about how your organization expects people to behave. So instead of the common default of hiring for cultural fit, which generally just means you hire people like you, or people you like, or people that are similar to you, what you need to do is understand what behaviours would enhance your culture and then hire for cultural add. And this moves us away from the tendency to hire people that think the same and towards a company built on diversity of perspectives, of cultures, and of ideas that complement the culture, while also enriching it. I love this ad. So you also need clarity around the role and where it sits. And if you don't have this, one of the first things that goes wrong is the ad. And it's often really, really immediately obvious from seeing a job ad that the organization just doesn't understand design. So one of those, if you see a job ad and they're looking for a designer who can also do CSS and JavaScript, you're like, oh, yeah, one of them. Or if you see somebody, they want a designer and they want them to do visual design and strategy and run A/B tests and do research, you're like, oh God, you've read about a unicorn, haven't you? You want one of them, but they're called unicorns for a reason. So basically they hire this person and the person probably doesn't have the support, and then they start failing at their job and leave again. Another thing, an organization is not really engaging with design well when you see a job ad and you see it for a design leadership position, and then they're also asking for Photoshop skills or people to be hands-on. Have you seen one of them? Yeah, that shows to me that the company isn't ready to invest in design leadership. And then finally, if I see adverts for product people, and I see that like 80 or 90% of that role is about research activities and understanding the customer or managing design, then it shows to me that organization doesn't see design as an equal partner, and it shows that all the strategy has been handed off to product. So all of this will make it really, really hard to attract quality people. So if you are hiring, you should invest some time looking at companies who hire well work and do some design design your organization before you hire designers. Now, another problem with hiring, so this is from a report from last year, and it says many UX designers started calling themselves information architects. Hello, Christina. Visual designers, writers, strategists. We're used to seeing job titles change from time to time as companies start to understand the depth of our work and to accommodate trends and market needs. So if you're hiring or if you're an HR person, there's so many different job titles and types of jobs out there. I feel your pain. So it's difficult what to know and who to hire when you have this massively crazed and complex landscape. So my recommendation to you and to your HR department is to start with the clarity of what problem this person you're hiring is going to solve, because that should show you the shape of the person. And the final type of clarity that you need is what can the person actually work on and impact and change, because designers are not magic bullets to all of your problems. So organizations don't want to hire someone to do a thing. They want to hire a magician who can wear every hat and solve every problem. Yes, and that's not going to happen. So you need to define the shape of the problem, you need to define the shape of the person, you need to make sure that you hire them really well. But the next thing that goes wrong is onboarding. And that's something that I'm trying to look at right now at Babylon, because we're hiring so many people. But onboarding is actually something that can really make or break someone's experience when they join a new organization. You need to design the onboarding process, like how do they get access to the tools, how do they understand the product, how do they understand the rest of the team, how do they understand metrics, who should they have lunch with, do you have a buddy? And so this is a workshop that we did at Babylon to try and understand how we would improve the onboarding system. Because if you get that wrong, this is my friend Peter, and I love this quote, observation, there's a good chance with new starters in big companies that genuine concern and confusion about process and ways of working gets misdiagnosed as imposter syndrome. And here's another lovely solution. So my friend Brendan, he also started at Google, and he said there's a wonderful thing called a blue dot. So any fellow Googler with a blue dot in their path is a safe, judgment-free buddy if things aren't going well and you need someone to talk to. So these are the kind of things you should design into your organization to make sure that your designers are onboarded well. So once you've got them in, you've onboarded them, there's another irritation that they may have, which is you don't give your designers a future. I've seen quite recently a lot of design teams are now reporting into product, and there's no route to seniority, as a lot of the strategic work is now subsumed into product. So if you really want designers to stick around, you need to create career ladders. Be really intentional about creating career ladders with the team that define what's expected in the role and how to move to the next level. And you need to make sure that there's a level for them to go to. And these career ladders should reflect both soft and hard skills. So you have to understand what is the criteria for promotion to become a manager, a director, or a vice president. What's your expected behaviours? What are the leadership skills? Because these are expression of your culture and values, but too often people in the team just see them as being random. So if you need any help with this, my friend Johnny Birch has just released a thing called Progression Pack. So come and talk to me about it later, but it's a website to try and support people building career ladders. It's fantastic. So you might detect a theme throughout this presentation. I can't speak today. So talking about collaborative teams, building things that solve real problems that are commercially focused, that are customer focused, and that continually learn. And you can't do any of this without excellent research. So irritation number 7 is that the organization just doesn't understand research. So many businesses either undervalue or simply don't understand design research. I mean, how many people have heard that bloody faster horse thing? I don't know if you've heard it, but somebody said to me, why Ford wouldn't have got where he was because, if he'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And I was like, oh my God, right, I know I'm talking to somebody that just doesn't get it when they say that. Because you don't ask people what they want. Design research is extremely complex, and it involves ethnographical and contextual inquiry, and so much more than simply asking people. So if somebody in your organization says that to you, you've got a lot of education to do. So you have to understand what is product design research, help your organization understand why it's different to market research, why it's different to analytics. You have to make sure they understand why they need it, and you have to make sure that they understand where it should sit, because I've seen UX design end up under the market research umbrella, which is not great. I wonder if anyone knows who this quote's from? Amazingly, it's from Jeff Bezos. Amazon is one of the most kind of quantitatively driven websites out there. But this is a quote from Jeff Bezos, who said, if the anecdote contradicts the data, believe the anecdote. And we can talk about whether this is correct later. But this is, I think if you have in your organization, if they're not appreciating qual research, tell them this, because qual is incredibly important. Analytics are lagging metrics, and they don't help you understand the why. Good qual can help you set a product vision by showing you unmet needs, and it shows you the people behind the data. Yeah, so Jeff Bezos. So my next irritation, number 8, is meetings. Alison talked fantastically about meetings. There's really not much more that I can add, except to ask, have you heard about the maker's schedule versus the manager's schedule? So this was first described by the very excellent Paul Graham. And he talks about 2 types of schedule. The powerful people are on the manager's schedule, and their day is divided into groups of like an hour or half an hour. And people who do the work need entire mornings to really get into the flow. So it's very difficult if you're a designer and your manager just keeps blowing up in the middle of your morning with meetings. So your job, if you're a design leader, is to try and structure the team's time and to protect them and to make sure that meetings are really useful. And the other, this is a quote here. So, meetings are the biggest waste of time for employees in the UK. That was a survey from May 28. So instead of having meetings just as like blowing people's days up, where it's just used to tell people where they have to sit passively in something, use meetings to try as a way to maximize our collaboration. And also, if you work in a very collaborative way, meetings become less onerous because you need them less often. Because if you're working in a quad doing discovery together, this removes the burden on meetings to communicate. So instead, treat meetings as events where the team comes together and work happens, rather than a one-sided imparting of info. Make them valuable. And have meetings and ceremonies on a regular cadence, if you can, like a morning stand-up, so that means the rest of the day is free. Use tools like Slack for anti-meetings. And then these sort of anti-meetings, that when you're having this sort of regular conversation that people can tune in and out of, this helps build the team culture and sense of trust. And then also, you don't need meetings because you're learning by shipping. So in the course of building a company, the most important tool you have to create a culture of shared values is communication, and meetings are critical to communication. So when you bring together a team of talented and diverse individuals, the only way they're going to operate a team is to spend time talking, listening, and understanding each other's perspectives. So unless everyone hired and shares the same experiences and backgrounds, there's no way a group of people can converge to a high-performance team without meeting, sharing, and learning together. So no amount of ping-pong is going to change that. So meetings, while they're dreadful, they're really important, and you have to craft them, just as Alison said, because there's almost nothing that's a substitute for a meeting. And another thing that's very, very important for meeting and shared communication is psychological safety. I'm sure most of you know about this by now. It's the project Aristotle from Google. So Google being Google, they hired loads of PhDs to investigate what made a high-performing team. And they're like, well, is it remote or not remote? Is it what they're working on? And they couldn't find any commonality. So they started to unpack it a little bit more. And they found that the most important thing for a high-performing team was psychological safety, which meant that people were able to speak their mind without fear of failure or criticism. They felt trusted and they felt safe. So this is the next thing that you really must change if you want to remove this irritation. I love this quote. Funny how working in a diverse team with people who are kind, supportive, and appreciative gives your productivity and self-worth a massive boost. Do not underestimate the importance of safe, welcoming teams, communities, and setting people up for success. So irritation number 9 is space. So when I was working at a government department, they had carpet on the walls. There was this dreadful the carpet on the walls. So I started putting Post-it notes on the window, and the facilities guys came up and said, you can't put Post-it notes in the window. And I was like, why? And he said, it stops them being bomb-proof. Really? I mean, come and tell me later, is that true? I have no idea, because God knows how strong a Post-it note is if that is true. So when you talk about space, people like that facilities guy or the manager, and when you talk about space, they think you're asking for something like this, or this, or indeed this. These are all real offices that people sent me, or this. And this was Moo, actually. The Moo was wonderful. But actually, what I'm talking about when I say space is an irritation for a design team, it's because they're unable to do this. Because we don't, as a design team, we don't need slides, we need walls. We need working walls. And it makes it simple to see and to critique work, to design in the open. You know, when you're designing and you're on a screen, you're often too close to what you're seeing, and you can't really understand the complexity. You have to zoom out so that you can understand patterns, you can sense make. And a wall externalizes your work, and it empowers different types of design thinking. And because we have this scale, because it's zoomed out, we can start to see patterns and affinities. So working walls provide this holistic view of your design, a map of the world, and it can help you lead to breakthroughs because you can rearrange them very easily. And finally, a wall is a physical container which you can use to bring the team together, and you can facilitate better dialogue, which, although it can be painful sometimes, can result in better design because everyone's on board and they're looking at the same thing, and you've been able to sift through everyone's thoughts and opinions. So by making design transparent and by arguing your points from this kind of better vantage point, you can end up with a much better and more solid result. And other thing about your environment and space is that your work environment conveys about a message about what you value, who you are, and where you are going. And I love this quote, space defines the culture, culture defines the space. So if you don't want to irritate your design team, think about what you value, give them space in order for them to do this work on the walls. So that leads me to the final irritation, which is culture, which is the biggest, most irritating, overarching irritation of all. So everything I've talked about here so far adds up to your culture. Culture's behaviours, systems, and practices, all guided by an overarching set of values. A great culture is what you get when all three of these are aligned. And when gaps start to appear, that's when you know you have problems and when great employees start to leave. So the gaps are things like, your organisation talks about work-life balance, but they promote people who stay late. People who stay late to do all this extra work. Or they talk about work-life balance and they give people really complex design tasks as a take-home task for an interview. And you can sense then that there's a kind of inconsistency, which is really uncomfortable. Or you talk about being a learning organisation, but you don't give people time to learn, you don't give them time off, you have no conference budget. And then so all of these kind of gaps and behaviour gaps shows that the culture is just not working, and that's when people leave. So great organisations and leaders know that culture is hard. It takes time to define and it takes work to execute. So you need to understand the behaviours expected through the organisations, and then you have to identify the systems and processes that help have those behaviours and values sustained. So shaping best practices that help employees in an organisation become better, that help close your culture gaps, means that you have more employees who want to stay. And if your organisational setup means they can't do work, or you have this kind of shiny brand of niceness outside and it's quite toxic inside, people will find out. And I'm not just talking about people reading reviews on Glassdoors. Designers network. We all talk to each other. And if your organisation's got toxic, people will start to learn. So if you get points or irritations 1 to 9 wrong, people might leave. But if you get this one wrong, people might not come in the first place. Anyway, I lied, it wasn't the last one. I've got a bonus irritation. And I found this, when I was at the Telegraph, we did research, so this is why qual and quant is really important. We found that people were more likely to click on articles, like listicles, when they had an unusual number. So that's why you see things like 27 reasons for X, so that's why I've got 11, so you'll remember this one. So the bonus irritation is micromanagement. Do you know this website, Hovering Art Directors? Well, the antidote to micromanagement, which everyone hates, and as designers, we really want autonomy. And I don't know if you've read this book. It's called Turn the Ship Around. So I first found this book when 3 years ago, I decided I was just going to start saying yes to things. I used to really hate public speaking. I thought, I'm just going to start saying yes. And I got a call and they said, do you want to come to Chile to do a talk? And I went, yes. And I didn't really think about the consequences. It was 27 hours there, 26 hours back. And I was like, oh God, what have I done to myself? But the main reason I said yes is because there was a man there called Rafi Krikorian who was then working at Twitter. And he talked about this book, and it's the story of a man who was, he went to naval school, to learn how to be a nuclear sub-commander, and he graduated top of his class. And the plan was that he was going to be given the top performing ship in the entire fleet. And he ended up being given the lowest performing as an experiment, so he could use his management style to try and literally turn the ship around. And he did. So he made sure that the people on the boat were autonomous. He gave them a sense of purpose. He showed them the way north and the sense of leadership. But most importantly was this autonomy, people just self-autonomy. And that turned them, as you said, from followers into leaders, became leaders of themselves. So for the bonus irritation, stop micromanagement and start giving people autonomy, because it really works. And then I've got a final story to tell you about that trip to Chile, which just cracks me up. And I'm sorry if you've heard it before, but I love this story so much. So when I was there, I was in an earthquake, which was bloody terrifying. I was the 20th floor of this building, and it was swaying. So I phoned reception, and I was like, there's an earthquake. She goes, yes, we know. And I was like, so I said, what do I do? And she goes, go back to bed. And I thought, I can't go back to bed. So I was shaking, and I thought, right, I know what I'll do. I'll go on Twitter. And I tweeted, oh my God, I've just been in an earthquake. And I got 2 responses. And one of them was from my friend, who's a UX designer. He's like, oh my gosh, Jane, are you okay? And the other one was from my friend Alex, who's a product guy. And he just went, size. And I said, this shows to me that UX designers have empathy and product people only care about metrics. And on that note, thank you very much. Enjoy lunch.